Awesome. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you guys for having me here. So like Bonnie said, my name is James Petty. Uh, I'm the CEO and Executive Director for the DevOps Collective. We run a few things you might have heard of, the biggest one being PowerShell.org. We also run the PowerShell and DevOps Global Summit every April in Bellevue, Washington, and what would have been the DevOps and Automation Summit in October this year. Unfortunately, that had to be postponed for that. Microsoft Cloud and Data Center MVP, 10 years experience working with the Windows system as a Windows system administrator, most of that being with the federal government. And like Bonnie said, and co-founder of the Chattanooga PowerShell user group, and also a co-organizer for PowerShell Saturday, or otherwise known as PowerShell on the River, here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about PowerShell Remoting. Just kind of set some expectations. We are right now using PowerShell 5.1 on a Windows 10 kind of environment. My assumption is that most of you are running PowerShell 5.1 in your production domain. On most of your servers, you might have PowerShell 7 on your laptop, which is great. I hope you do, but if you're not, so 5.1 is kind of what we're using. So my live environment running on a Hyper-V infrastructure here on my laptop. I have 3 Windows servers, domain controller, 2 member servers, and I have a Windows 10 box that I'll be running everything from. That's actually what we're looking at right now that I forgot to put on this slide. But just kind of setting some expectations for everyone there. Everything that we're going to see here does work exactly as it should in 7. So I'm not showing you anything that's 5.1 exclusive. And we are only going to be talking about Windows to Windows, or at least demoing Windows to Windows. If we have some time, we might talk about some Windows to Linux to Mac, and Mac to Windows. Remoting would be all just kind of like theories and concepts. And those concepts are only available in PowerShell 7 using SSL as opposed to WinRM. All right, so kind of a very brief history of remoting. So kind of like what Jeffrey Stover talked about a little bit this morning. So PowerShell remoting has been around since PowerShell v2. So it's not a new thing. It's been around for an extremely long time. And it uses the WS-MAN protocol. So all of the connections that are being made are sent over TCP port 5985, or if you're using certificates, 5986. And all of these requests are HTTP requests. And also I should note, we are not using certificates in this lab environment. There is a fantastic article on PowerShell blog. I'll have to find it and I'll tweet it out. I'm sorry about that. But there's a fantastic blog about the pros and cons of using certificates in your production domain environment. It's about a 50-50 mix on whether you should or whether you shouldn't. So that's between you and your cybersecurity professionals to decide if that's something that you want to endeavor in. Most of all the concepts that we're going to be going over can be found in this free book, The Secrets of PowerShell Remoting. It's free on LeanPub. There's the link. Then I'll get with Bonnie and Lee and the rest of the team to figure out where the slides and stuff are going to be for this. But I see you go to LeanPub. You can also go to PowerShell.org/ebooks, and the link is there as well. Again, it's a free book, and that's where most of these concepts can be found. So kind of go over kind of a quick overview of how PowerShell remoting works, kind of on a diagram, and then I hate PowerPoint, so we'll dive right in to some actual hands-on keyboard demoing kind of right after this. But it's important to understand the concept before we kind of jump right in. So we start down here at the bottom. So this is your computer. So this is your laptop or your workstation that you're or your VM, whatever you're working on. Hopefully it's a jump box, but that's a whole nother story. So we start here by running PowerShell on your machine, and you're going to using the WS-MAN protocol. So you can enter a PS session or invoke command. So it's going to send an HTTP request to the WinRM service on our local or on our remote machines. So we'll kind of go over what that looks like here in a minute. But it's going to be listening on that port 5985 that we were talking about. And by default, it's going to just take that command and send it to the PowerShell endpoint on the remote machine. But it said the default is the 64-bit endpoint. I'll show you a few of the other endpoints that you can choose, although why you would, I don't know, but this is where it's going to default to. And it's actually an execute command in a remote PowerShell session on the remote machine. That's kind of the big difference we want to talk about, is the difference between remoting and then using so like the win commands of sim or the sim commands, they have the dash computer name parameter, but that means your machine is doing all the processing, which kind of 100% defeats the purpose. We're trying to offload that processing power to our remote computer, let them crunch the numbers or crunch the data, whatever you're trying to do, and just send you back a result. All right, so like I said, so why do we want to do remoting? So gone are the days of click, click, next, finish. This is a terrible way to deploy an IIS web farm, especially, if you might have dozens or, depending on large companies, maybe even hundreds of IIS web servers. So why in the world would you want to click next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times however many machines you have? And actually there's 2 more after this, so 10 times on your entire IIS web farm, when I can just write a simple PowerShell script and execute that from my machine on my entire web farm at once and be done. It's faster. Like I said, you're using the remote machines to do all of the crunching. It's a whole lot easier, so I only have to do it once. And also, most importantly, it's consistent. It's going to be the same across every machine. If you were to go back here and you were to accidentally miss one of these checkboxes in one of your dozens or hundreds of servers in your IIS web farm, you're going to be spending days running around, beating your head against the wall, trying to find out why this one server is not working correctly. Or I can just write this one little script, execute it on every machine, and every one of them is going to go exactly the same. All right, again, said I hate demos, or I love demos. I hate PowerPoint. So we're just going to go in here. I am using the ISE. I know, shame on me. But that's because my lab is isolated, doesn't have access to the internet, and I didn't think about bringing VS Code over to install it. So using the ISE, it also works much better for demos than VS Code. VS Code is still a little wonky sometimes, but that's fine. All right, so we're gonna just kind of jump right in here. So to start off, you can couple ways to enable remoting on your remote machines. Obviously, the easiest way, I don't have a screenshot of, the easiest way is with a group policy. Just put it in your default domain policy or wherever you want to put it that gets applied to your servers and enable remoting. You can also do it manually. So there's 2 different commands. WinRMQC is the command line way of doing it, but we're PowerShell folks. We like to do things PowerShell. So enable PSRemoting does the exact same thing. So both of these commands do the exact same thing. If you're lazy and you don't like to type, WinRMQC, or you can do enable PSRemoting, but with tab completion, it's about the same number of keystrokes. So, kind of whichever way you want to do that. So there's a couple different types of remoting that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about one-to-one, so one machine to one machine, and then we're going to talk about one-to-many. So right now we're just going to do one-to-one. So I have a task that I want to do on a machine. So if I'm down here on my local machine and I type, this is who am I? So all of these get service. I love picking on the bit service because it's actually really kind of completely useless unless you're using SCCM. So it's a real good service to be able to bounce back and forth and not not destroy anything on your machine. So you'll see me pick on that, the spooler service, a lot during these demos. So like I said, all of these commands I'm here, they're running here on my VM or on my local machine, wherever you're at, and my machine is the one that's doing all it's doing all the crunching. But I can do so. Our first command we're talking about is enter PS session, and then you're going to put the computer name. So in this instance, just going to go into my domain controller, and then there's credential flag. I highly suggest you use credential flag. Because if you don't do this, and I'll just show you quick examples. So if I just do this, it's going to run under the exact same context that I'm running under, that I am right now. So you can run command who am I, so I can see my domain, then I'm an account called admin. And then I should also point out right here, so it says DC01 in brackets over to the far left, unless you're manipulating your terminal or your your layout here in any way. So if you see this right here, this means you're in a you're in a remote session on DC01, because that's how you know you successfully entered the command. You know, we can always type the host name to verify that I'm actually on DC01. But like I said, I'm running under the context of what this machine is running under, or what this PowerShell window is running under, which is obviously not something that we really want to do. I really hope you're not running you know, an administrator Windows ISE machine underneath your sysadmin account. If you are, come and talk to me afterwards, and we'll tell you how to fix that. So we should be using our credential flag. Now, I do already have a credential file saved. Actually, no, I don't, because I thought I did. So we'll do that real quick. That was in a different window that I was testing earlier. So we should do a get credential here, little pop-up box. So Bob is our admin. Bob is a domain admin that we're going to be using. It may not be the best of ideas to use a domain admin, but for lab purposes and demos in an isolated network, it works just fine. All right, so we're just passing. You could put get credential here if you absolutely wanted to. You just got to make sure you put it in parentheses, and that'll prompt it. But just for ease of use, I have it stored here in a variable. So it's thinking about it. There we go. So now obviously we can see our prompt has changed. I'm on DC01. I'm running, says I'm under Bob's home directory. And I can run the command, who am I? That's not who am I. This is going to bomb because it's not a command. There we go. And we can see that I am running underneath the context of Bob, even though on my Windows 10 machine, I'm logged in as admin. So this is how we're going to do a lot of our, it's how we're going to run anything I need to do. So, you know, again, get service, the bit service, I'm on the domain controller. Again, so that domain controller is the one that's doing all of the crunching. All right, so here, again, I can do anything, you know, get AD user. So I can run, this is exactly like if I have an interactive terminal, like if I have a mouse and a keyboard and a monitor, and I'm running, I should also point using core boxes, so they don't have to do these to begin with. But if I had a monitor and a mouse and keyboard plugged into this machine, I would still get this prompt right here. So this is exactly like I'm sitting at the keyboard. Now we're going to exit the session because there's two ways you can do one-to-one remoting. So we got the PS session that we just did, which we gave the computer name. And then the other one, this is probably my favorite command. It's called the Invoke command. And I'll explain, it'll come a little more later kind of why it's my favorite, but we'll put a pin in that conversation. But just so you know, this might be my favorite command in PowerShell. So we do Invoke command, computer name, kind of what we want to do, and we give it a script block. So in this case, we're just going to get service. Now, so let me run this, and then I'll explain to you what the difference between the two are. So it's running. There we go. So we see the bit. So we got the name of it. Name is bit, status is stopped, and then we have a new column here. PS computer name, and it's it ran against DC01. Now let me explain to you kind of what this did. So this invoke command. Actually, it's going to be better if I go up here to this. Here. So this invoke command I did here on my machine. I told it where I wanted to go, what HTTP listener, what server is looking for, and I took that entire package that I was wanting to do. So in this case, that get service bits. It went all the way up the diagram here, went to my remote machine, my DC01, started a PowerShell process, executed that get service bits, and then sent that information back down to my screen. Now, some of you might be picking up on why this is kind of instantly kind of becoming one of my, top commands that I like the most. Because am still doing, I can do any, and I can do anything I want here. I can put a whole bunch of stuff in here. You know, I can do the spooler, I can get AD user Bob. And so it'll run all, you know, it'll run all three of these commands on the remote machine and send that information back to me. Of course, you know, it also helps if you can spell, you know, to get all the results back. But like I said, all that work is being done on my domain controller, and then just apparently I can't spell spooler correct either, but I think we get the idea at this point. Again, all that information is being processed on the DC01, crunched up, and is sending serialized data back to my screen. Now, I say serialized data. We'll talk a little bit about data manipulation when it comes to remoting, because it gets very wonky. But just know that kind of it's just going to spit all this back to my screen. This is one-to-one remoting. There's actually there's very few reasons why you could ever see doing like a one-to-one remoting. Now, maybe your domain controller is sick, or you know, you need to come in and run a command on a domain controller. You know, you enter PS Session or do an Invoke command against a machine. But we should be writing and kind of thinking in the methodology of, I'm not working on a machine. I'm working on, you know, 300 machines or 400 or 2. You know, I'm working on all of my IS servers or all of my domain controllers. So that's where I like this Invoke command comes in, because I can work on all my machines at the same time. So enter PS Session is a machine. So I guess if you have a lot of core boxes, you know, domain controllers, SCCM servers, print servers, all great candidates for your core boxes. So if you're running these enter PS Session one-to-one, Invoke command is kind of where we can do the one-to-many. So it still takes the computer name parameter. So we can see here. But the difference is, so it can, this computer name can also take an array of objects or array of server names. So I can do Invoke command, computer name, you know, so, you know, this example right here, I have my domain controller, and I'm, so, you know, so we already saw this. We already ran this command earlier, but I can do, what is this? So I can do this Invoke command on my domain controller and my server 01. That directory doesn't exist anymore, but we can run these two commands. Now, so because everything is running locally, the results are going to come back kind of fast. It's kind of like we did here. But kind of the interesting thing to note, for spooler is not working for some reason. Let's do bits so we just get some error. So just so we can get these errors out of here. So one thing to note, when you're doing this Invoke command and you're doing it on multiple machines, it's going to send you the data back in the order that it receives it. It's not a sequential. It's not going to do the domain controller first and then do this one. That really defeats the whole purpose. Well, if I want to do that, I would just do a for each block and and do one at a time. It does both of these simultaneously. Again, there's only 2 here, so it's not the best of example. But let's say you had 30 SCCM servers and distribution points, and you wanted to run the command against all of them. You could do that. Actually, let me do this real quick. Just copy this. I'm not actually running this command, but kind of the best way that I would do things back when I was working for the government is I would do is I would read my servers from a text file. So again, so computer name, it can read an array of objects. So I can do a get content on C server. I could also get AD computer and filter on organizational units. So you can start filtering on AD on OUs kind of here. You can, however you want to get your list of servers, you can put them here in this block and it will process them. So a couple things to note. Like I said, so here I'm only doing 2, so it's not that great of an example, and that's because I don't have enough horsepower to build 40 servers on my laptop. But so right now, it's the default throttling limit is 32 servers or 32 machines at the same time. And once it does 32, if you're familiar with like the Java or the C++ version of like pop and top, as soon as the one that gets done, the next one in line kind of goes in the queue, starts executing. So if you have some machines that are running slower than others or can't process the data as fast, it's just going to, as soon as it gets done, it's going to puke it out on the screen, just like this did, and it's going to take the next one in the line. There is a registry key that you can change to up that to 64 machines at once. Do that at your own risk. Make sure you have enough horsepower on your machine to be able to kind of handle, handle that much work that is sending out. But I did this for 7 or 8 years, my previous job, and never changed 32, never had a problem. I was hitting 100 SCCM servers at a time doing this and was not having a problem. Okay, so we saw this use an array, which we did. So a couple things another things we can talk about is different ways we can send data. So right now we're using a script block. So everything inside these little squiggly braces right here is going to get executed on the remote machine. Data is going to get crunched, and data is going to come back. I can do a file. So I just had this a name dot. It's just a PS1 file. That's all it is. And actually, I'm just gonna, for simplicity's sake, this is actually just going to create some 80 users, but I think there's an error in this CSV file that I don't want to fix live. So we're just going to change this to run get process is all we're going to do. So we can use the invoke command, computer name. And so again, I'm going to run with 3 servers. So this file path is my local machine. This is not on a remote machine. This is on my local machine that I'm going to execute. So we saw that here. We saved it. All it's going to do is run get process and then puke some stuff back out on the screen. So this way, if you have a really large file, like if you're trying to change 100 different settings on your IS farm or whatever you're trying to do, or someone gave you a file, it's like, can you run this on all these machines instead of having to copy and paste that in the script block or kind of whatever you're doing? You can just give it a file path. It does work with UNC paths. Just make sure that the context of this machine right here that you're running. So in this case, my Windows 10 machine has access to the UNC path that the file is stored, not the credential flag that we're using. Actually, these aren't using, but not the credential that we're sending it over. So kind of, so again, just to make sure, because I got confused a little bit too. The context that this ISE window is running under would need access to a UNC path if that's what you were doing. Exactly. So if you're in the UNC path, just do it just like that, and off you go. All right, so that's, again, it's 2 different types of remoting, one-to-one, one-to-many. There's a few different ways that we can do this. So we've been using computer names and giving them individual computer name, using the credential flag to pass everything over, pass my credentials over. But there are some people out there who really like sessions. Minimize all this correctly. There we go. They like PowerShell Sessions. Sessions, again, there's mixed. Some people really like sessions, and some people absolutely hate them. And some people are like me. So if you like them, you can use them, and that's great. And if you don't like them, you don't have to use them. It's 100% up to you. Let me do this. So I run a get PS session here. So I'm on my Windows 10 machine here. So I run a get PS session. We can see I have an open connect. So my machine is listening. I'm sorry. I have a remote session created to server 01. So remote machine state is open, and it's using Microsoft.PowerShell. So again, it's my Windows 10 machine. I have an open connection to server 01. All right, so it's we can create a new session here. So the new PS session, we give a computer name. Again, if you don't specify the credential, it's going to use the same credentials that this ISC is running under. So we always want to make sure we give it a credential, and we want to save this in a session, and a session variable. In this case, we're using session 1. And then, so if I look at this session here, so this is just, let's look at get PS session. All right, so we can see the session I just created. So let's talk about sessions for a minute. When I was doing the enter PS session and the Invoke command, I would create my connection to the remote machine. I would do my work. I would close that connection, and I would send that information back to my Windows 10 and it puke it out on the screen. The reason a lot of people don't like sessions, is where the big controversy is because when I create this session right here, as we can see, the session is there and it's opened. I'm not using it, but I have an active PowerShell process on DC01 that's waiting for my commands. So it's kind of, again, this is why some people don't like it, because I have an active connection open already, as opposed to sending information, chunking it, closing that connection, and bringing it back. So now we can do the same commands, enter PS session. Instead of computer name, we're going to use the session parameter, and we're just going to give it our session name here. And then just like that, we're back into our domain controller, running under Bob. And now we're back to our exact same one-to-one remoting, just like we did before. And I have an interactive terminal on my remote machine. Now even though I exit, so I exited my session, whereas before, when I was up here and I was using just the computer name parameter, when I would exit, my session would terminate. Here again, my session is still active. Session ID 20, DC01, open. My session is still active. So you want to remember that when you're using sessions. You're gonna have to come back and close these. So I can also use my invoke command with my sessions. Same thing. I can use my script block or my file path and kind of do whatever, kind of what we're looking for. Okay, so again, everything ran here on DC01, ran underneath Bob. So let's create a new session. So this is a variable called session 2. So again, new PS session, computer name. This time, again, we can put, so it takes an array, so you can put whatever we want in here. So I'm putting my 3 servers here because that's all I have. But again, you can read from your text file or filter from AD user or AD filter, kind of whatever you want to do. So I'm building these sessions on these 3. So if we look at my sessions again, now this is where it starts getting a little wonky here. Notice I have 2 sessions to DC01 open. They have different process ID or different IDs. One is 20, one is 21, but they're both PowerShell connections on the remote machine with an open state. So remember, now I have 2 PowerShell processes on DC01, both running under Bob, but they came under different sessions. There are different sessions from this Windows 10 machine. So we're going to invoke command session, but this time our variable has our session, but a session has 3. So this has all 3 sessions in it: DC01, server 01, server 02. And that's not going to work because C remoting doesn't exist. This is an older demo. I had to rebuild my lab, and I forgot a step. So, but we can see, server 2, DC01. This is actually a perfect example here of data coming back at different times. It's the first time we've been able to see this in a demo. The server 01 is the one that actually came back first, and then DC01, and then server 2, whereas here they're in a different order. So remember, it's going to run all of these at the same time and then send that data back. There's no guarantee what order you're going to get data back in. So whenever we're done with our sessions, especially if, I don't know if if any of you work in the SQL world, Are you very familiar with this? You know, you have to create a session to your SQL server, and when you're done, it's very important that you kill your session. You know, otherwise, you know, bad things happen. So same thing with PowerShell here. So we get our PS session. I'm just going to pipe that to remove PS. We can remove all of them. If I wanted to remove just one, I could just give it the ID. But now we're running. I just removed all of them. So what this did, this broke the connection between my machine and the remote machine. It killed that PowerShell process on the remote machine, and now everyone's all hunky dory. All right, so this is kind of where we're going to talk about. So earlier, you know, we talked about serialized data and getting data back. So when we run something on, now I do apologize for these little tick marks here. I know, shame on me. That's because typically I'm on a much smaller screen. So this is just so it all fits on one line. So we talked about getting data back. So if I do invoke command DCO1, let me, and then we're just gonna, you know, get a WMI object, this Win32 process here. So it's gonna run, it's getting information back. So that's a whole lot of data getting back, that we're gonna get back. So now when we wanna talk about, let's get something a lot smaller. All right, so again, I told you I like to pick on bits, so we're just going to get service bits. Now, you know, we've run this probably 4 or 5 times here already, so we know exactly what we're going to get back. So if I want to, now normally, if I do get service bits pipe, you know, select just a status. I don't know if Jeff's watching, you know, but always make sure you use full parameter names. Don't use aliases. There we go. So if I'm on my local machine, I do get service bits, pipe that, select object status, I get running. But if I try to do that here, select object, and we try to run this. Thinking about it. All right. All right. So it's actually interesting. That was actually not supposed to work. I'm a little confused. But we want to make sure that we're doing. Sorry about that. We do want to make sure we get all of our filtering done here inside of the pipe. And actually, I did. Now I do know. I'll explain why that worked in a minute. So get service bits. If I want to select just status. So any of our filtering, anything that we want to do, we always want to make sure we do inside of the script block here. And the reason for that is because we want the remote machine to do all the data crunching for us. There we go. This is why I got my my things backwards here. So why one's working, one's wasn't, and why one wasn't working. So when we do this select status here inside the script block, so we get the status is stopped, but so this invoke command, it's sending data back, serialized data back, and you can't filter out that serialized data. So that's why we get the computer name and the run space ID, even though you told it only select the status. Again, you still want to try to do all of your filtering on the remote machine, and it's just, you know, you can always make it look pretty here. We'll kind of get back to this and get back to our original example here. So if we run this, do you believe here that this? It's been a while since I ran this. All right. Yeah, and this is kind of exactly what we were showing before. So all of our filtering here. So I gave you some misinformation. I apologize. I want to make sure I get that back correctly. So the filtering here outside the process block or out of the script block does work kind of as expected. And this get owner.user, some of the properties that this class sends back. I guess we have to understand the concept between serialized and unserialized data. So you can only you can only filter out on serialized data. So the non-serialized data that comes through, I think we had this running up here. So a lot of the stuff that comes through, it's called non-serialized data. You can't filter on that. So now that I just royally confused everyone on that, I'm just going to move on before I confuse you anymore. All right, so kind of the last thing, it's kind of running a little fast actually. So kind of the last thing that we're going to talk, that I'm going to show you, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about the remoting in PowerShell 7 and how that works, is how we copying items. For any of you who ever have the misfortune of having to deal with printers, know the pain of keeping print drivers up to date, and how in the world do you keep do you keep all your print drivers up to date? Where do you keep them? How do you get them to your print servers? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is one of the things I had to do. And this was, so in PowerShell 5, so this is kind of, this is how we'd have to do it. We do a for each, for S and servers. In this case, servers would probably be a text file or an OU, or kind of however I was filtering on these. Copy item, where it's at locally on my machine, and then the full UNC path of where it's going on the remote machine. It would do this one at a time. It would do one, copy, wait, and it would stop, and then it would do the second one, and then the third one. And if you had I had 60 plus print servers, so trying to copy an HP or Lexmark print driver across 60 machines, would take all night. And heaven forbid one of them crashed in the middle. You have to start all over again, and it was awful. So kind of one of the last updates with Windows PowerShell 5.1 that kind of came out was the ability to copy across sessions. So this was, I guess, one of the big reasons why people like sessions. So again, remember, I have no sessions. I killed them all. So I have no active session, so I can create a new session here. And because so we'll do this across 2 machines. And just to show kind of everyone that I'm not kind of, that I'm not messing around with them and kind of showing you any voodoo or anything. So this is just a Windows or File Explorer. So what we're going to do, this is $. So what we're going to do, we're just going to copy this item. So this is on my Windows 10 machine, just a text file. So text file says "Hello Chicago," and I'm going to send it to the destination machine. Now this is kind of where it gets you have to change your mindset a little bit. So remember, the old way we had to use a UNC path of / where server name / $C / wherever we're putting it. So this is the exact path where you want to put it on the remote machine. So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to the root of C. So we can see here, there is not a text file called chicago.txt. The same holds true for server 2 here. I don't have a chicago.txt here. So we're going to run this again. So we're using our sessions. So I have 2 sessions built, one to server 1, one to server 2. We're going to copy this item across. I supported this 14 minutes ago. Okay, well, maybe I'll just tell you about it. Okay, so something is wrong with my second server, so I don't know why that happened, but we did have, so we can see here now I do. So remember, before it wasn't there, now it is. So I had this, Hello Chicago text file. So you can imagine the possibilities here of these sessions, being able to put hundreds of computers here in these sessions and copying those print drivers from one to the other and across, all the way across your service territory, kind of wherever you're going at. So there's also a from session, so you can copy items the reverse. I don't have an example of that, and the demo gods are not the best of friends, so I'm not going to type that live. But you can do the exact same. So I can copy from a remote machine something that I want, and then bring that to my local machine using a from session. From session. So that's just the reverse. So that's all the demos I have. But I did want to talk just a few minutes about the difference between remoting in PowerShell, because I have about 5 minutes, it looks like. Okay, so they're not telling me no, so we're just gonna go with that. So like I said, everything I showed you here today works in PowerShell 7 as is. You don't have to do anything special, no changes, no nothing. It's just remoting, it's been the same, been out since V2, and it's pretty much been the same since then. The difference says right now 5.1, we're using the WinRM protocol. Everything's an HTTP request. With PowerShell 7, you have the option of using an SSL flag. Now I don't have PowerShell 7 installed, but I can still show you. Oh, use SSL. Okay, so we can use this use SSL flag. Now you have to have SSL set up on your on your Windows machine and on your Linux machine and your Mac, and kind of however pass those keys and stuff back and forth. But that's not, there's Anthony Nocentino has a great session on that from the PowerShell Summit 2019. It's up on the PowerShell.org YouTube video or YouTube page on how to set up SSH keys so that you can do this. But you can, from here, you can go using SSL as opposed to WinRM. You can go Windows to Windows, Windows to Linux, Windows to Mac, Mac to Linux. You kind of imagine a whole triangle with arrow, but instead of just having the two arrows, everything can go to everything else using this SSL. And then from there, everything else works. It works the exact same. It's how you're making that connection from one machine to the other changes, but everything else in the background is still the same. For instance, if you're going from a Windows to a Linux machine, that PowerShell process or PowerShell daemon on the Linux machine is still the one crunching all the data and sending it back. The PowerShell process on the Mac is still the one that's processing everything, crunching the data and sending it back, puking it back to your screen. So the only thing that's changing is how you're connecting to that machine. It's just like kind of going along with that. One thing to make sure, I guess it's not really a limitation, just something you got to be aware of, is you got to know what commands are on the remote machine. Just because I have, I might have the AD module installed on my domain controller, but if I'm on my domain controller going to another machine, and my modules don't follow me back and forth from my session. So the modules that you have are just the modules that you have installed locally. And I had one more demo that I forgot about, but I don't know where it went. So again, I'm not going to type that up on the fly, but it was just talking about using global parameters and how you can pass parameters back and forth. Not going to try it because I only have about 3 minutes left, and if it doesn't work, I'm just going to look foolish. So maybe I'll put a blog post about that out or something with how to use that. But I guess that's all I got. So I'll pass it back to Lee and Bonnie and the rest of the game.